Hello and welcome to the Headache Doctor podcast, where on this podcast, it's our mission to educate and empower everyone with headaches and migraines so that you can break free from a life of fear of your next headache or migraine and dependence on medication. In today's podcast, we're going to talk about tension type headaches. This is one of our most listened to podcasts. There must be a lot of you out there with tension headaches or tension type headaches. And so we're going to break down why you might get tension type headaches. What does it even mean to have a tension type headache? What we see clinically, how it presents, and then we're also going to leave you with some valuable tips and tricks so that you know how to help manage it on your own. All right, so tension type headaches are they're common, they're prevalent. A lot of people are familiar with tension headaches. That's because we all carry tension to some extent through our shoulders, through our neck. And now a tension headache would be a headache usually presents in the forehead, in the front of the head, not necessarily specific to one side. So both sides are what we call bilateral in the healthcare setting. So and oftentimes it can be like just the front of the forehead. So people will say like the front of my head hurts. Sometimes it's described as a band or a strap, maybe pressure, and so it's less of a descriptive type of pain and I'll say more general. When descriptive, for example, would be, I have pain that starts on the right side in my neck, wraps up and around. It feels maybe like a stabbing into my eye, a shooting pain into my eye. That would be a more descriptive pain because it's a specific type of pain in that it's sharp, it's stabbing. They're describing it as a specific object, like running through their eye, which sounds terrible. We do get that description quite a bit, though. The tension type headache, again, is more diffuse. It's dull, achy, as opposed to sharp and stabbing. It's also, so the specific type of pain would be right-sided or left-sided and start in the neck or in the temple, whereas this is just sort of a general, like just the front of my head. The forehead hurts, okay? Now, a couple things that we do with that information, all right? So when someone says that they have pain in the front of their head, and whether it's like right in the middle or both sides and the temples potentially of that strap-like presentation, what our mind goes to is that there are likely multiple sources of pain, multiple types of tissue that are actually sending a pain signal to the brain. The specific type of pain usually is triggered by a more specific presentation of the problem. So mechanically, in our neck, there could be a joint on that same side of the headache that's irritated, not very happy, and so that specific area is sending the pain signal, and that matches where it's on that one side, and when the neck is angry, it kind of ramps up. Now, when we think of a tension type headache, because it's more of a diffuse presentation, less descriptive, that generally means that there are multiple locations that are sending a painful stimulus, a painful sensory input to the brain. And then the brain has to figure out what to do with that information. All right. Now, in both of these scenarios, the brain is perceiving a headache. It's perceiving pain coming from the head when the original source is somewhere else. So neck, jaw, shoulders. All right. The difference between a specific, let's say a typical migraine presentation, or what we call a cervicogenic headache, and the tension type headache is that the migraine and the cervicogenic headache do likely have one area that is more dominant in its sending of a pain signal. All right. So it doesn't mean that if you have a classic migraine presentation where the right side or the left side will hurt and it wraps up around, that doesn't mean that there's only one part of your neck that is a problem. It just means that there's one part of your neck that is louder, it's angrier, it's frustrated with the amount of tension or load or stress that it's had to carry. And a tension type headache, there are multiple areas, and generally it's going to be a muscle generated type of signal. All right. So in both scenarios, it's not exclusive to the specific joint on the specific side, and tension type, it's not specific to the muscle. So there's a spectrum here, and generally any type of headache, that person will present with multiple things going on. All right, so the joint, the muscles, there are lots of different things that are actually sending a pain signal. But when the tension type headache, it tends to be the muscle tension itself that is more dominant, and that the brain is having to respond to, and that's why you're getting a headache. Okay. So why would that be the case? All right. Some other things before we jump into that relate to your presentation of a tension type headache. Generally, the tension type headache will increase throughout the day. It's going to be less common for people to wake up with that tension type pattern of pain in their forehead. And the primary reason for that is when you're upright and moving throughout the day, or maybe you're not moving and you're just sitting at a computer, your shoulders and your neck are having to respond to gravity. Gravity's pulling you down. And so they're having to work. They have stress through them. When you're sleeping, generally the shoulders and the neck, these muscle groups, are not having to do as much. I mean, maybe nothing at all. And so you having a tension type headache when you wake up would be less common. There may be reasons for that. Maybe you're grinding or clenching your teeth. Potentially your shoulders kind of drooped forward, and the tension in your shoulder is not able to relax, and it's kind of pulling on your neck. Generally, though, that's going to be more specific to one side. And but you could also, there is a scenario if you're waking up with a tension type headache where you just feel like stiff and achy all over. It has to do with the activity that you did the day before. So just a few nuances here to the general rule of the headache being during the day and then ramping up. But if it starts in the morning, it could be related to the exercise you did the day before. And we'll talk more about that. But there can be an association or correlation between your exercise intensity and then potentially getting a headache the next day. Again, we'll talk more on that later. But generally the pain will be better in the morning, or maybe non-existent right when you get up, and then will build throughout the day. Potentially in like afternoon, evening, it will peak, and then potentially you feel like you have to, take a nap, take a break, medication if it's needed, that sort of thing. All right. So again, the reason is just stress, gravity weighing down on your shoulders, on your neck, those muscles that are primarily generating this pain signal. And again, the reason that the dull achiness is the way these symptoms present is because muscle, we know that muscle, when a muscle's not happy, it sends more of that dull, achy type of pain. So that the type of pain someone experiences gives insight into what structure is the actual problem, or is sending the pain signal itself. So joint is going to be more of like that stabby, sharp, specific type of pain. Nerve can be like burning or numbness, tingling. And then dull achiness is usually muscle. Okay, so dull achiness in the front of the head means multiple muscles sending a pain signal. And generally those are going to be muscles in the shoulders and in the neck, potentially in the jaw as well. All right, so muscle groups that are commonly blamed would be like the upper traps. The upper traps are definitely a part of this problem. I don't know if they are the primary driver of the tension. They're the bigger muscle in our shoulder that would elevate our shoulders. One of the overlooked muscles that I think is potentially a bigger part of the problem is the levator scapula. Okay. And so one of the dynamics here with the tension type headache is the shoulder is dysfunctional. And so we'll talk about the levator scapula and the upper trap dynamic, and why if they're not stable, if they're not functioning efficiently, why there would be tension that would build up and what to do about it. Okay. So other kind of signs that it's common for people with tension type headaches to also have a different type of headache. So you might have a tension headache that is, it lasts longer, maybe the intensity is lower, and then every now and then you get like a bad migraine. Okay, that's also a very common scenario that we run into. And then the other thing you might notice is stress and strain on your shoulders with activities. Could be just like household chores, or you're moving and you're picking up heavy boxes, or maybe you're exercising and you have a shoulder day, and you've just increased the amount of stress on your shoulders. So that would have less to do with the neck and more to do with your shoulders and how your shoulders are functioning. So tension type headaches do have a bit more of a shoulder focus than other types of headaches would. Poor posture is definitely a part of this. The forward shoulder, forward head position is almost always there with tension type headaches. Okay, so from here, let's talk about how this scenario would develop. Understanding the why behind headaches and migraines is important. Your specific scenario is going to be challenging to, and even if someone comes in person, oftentimes we don't spend too much time on understanding all of your background to understand how you got to this point. There are 1,000 different reasons why someone would present with headaches, and sometimes it's fruitful to understand them, and we can catch them. But sometimes it takes up quite a bit of time just to understand why you're in this scenario. Now, of course, when we're taking someone through treatment, we talk about the things that they should change, and we ask specific questions so that the big things that need to change are highlighted so that they don't continue and find themselves in the scenario again. But with tension type headaches, one of the big ones that I think is overlooked, as far as it seems benign, it seems fine to sit at a desk and look at a computer, okay? This is so prevalent. It's so common in our society nowadays, especially after COVID and people working from home. Who knows what your home desk setup looks like? But just sitting with prolonged poor posturing changes your resting posture. It's in a sense, you are asking your neck and shoulders to do work. You're asking specific muscle groups to fight gravity, even though you're like slumped forward. So you're in the most, I guess what I'd call it is like a passive position. Like you're not actively doing much, but you are putting your muscles on the front side in a shortened position and the back side in a lengthened position. And then you're also changing how the load on your spine, so the weight of your head, the load as it's transferred to the neck and then to the mid back and shoulders, it's transferred forward, okay? And we know, I say this a lot, but 15-degree forward head tilt doubles the perceived weight on the neck. And so even though it feels like I'm relaxed, which the word relaxed here is going to relate to that passiveness of the position, like you're just sort of slumped into whatever gravity pulls you into, increases the amount of stress and strain on these muscles that are trying to pull the shoulder blades back, the shoulder muscles like the upper trap and levator scapula that are trying to keep the head from falling forward, and then other cervical, meaning neck muscles that are trying to keep your head from falling forward. And so even though it feels relaxed, it feels like you're not really straining anything, there is a higher level, albeit a low level, but a higher level of stress placed through these specific muscle groups. So the problem is not in that moment that anything is like being harmed or damaged. By sitting with a slouch position for a moment, nothing is wrong. Like everyone should be able to sit like that and be totally fine. The problem is the length of time that we're spending in that position. And so the key here is the word prolonged. So prolonged poor posturing actually changes just about almost every tissue in our body is what we call plastic, meaning it's always changing and adapting to the stress that we place through it. So our bodies are always learning. And if you're teaching your body to sit with a forward posture, forward head, every structure is accommodating to that and learning and saying, okay, like I'm going to basically shorten on the front end, like muscle tissue will adaptively shorten, ligaments, tendons will adaptively shorten on the front. And then on the back side, these muscles are not necessarily conditioned to just sit in one position and hold, okay? And so they'll become fatigued, worn out. Ultimately, that's what leads to this muscle saying, hey, I'm not happy, sending a pain signal. But every tissue is learning and adapting to the stresses we place through it and trying to become better at it. But if we fall outside of what our body was designed to do and what would be normal, that's when we run into things like pain. So people ask all the time, well, what specifically is causing my pain? Is it the nerve? Why is the nerve not happy? Is it the muscle? And if we zoom out, at the nth degree of saying, well, what is causing this? It would be, well, you're not giving your body the movement it needs. And every tissue in your body is responding to that in a negative way. So the nerve isn't getting that glide all the way from the neck all the way down to the fingertips. The muscles aren't having this nice contract, relax rhythm throughout the day. And the ligaments, which surround joints, aren't having the degree of movement that they actually want to have. And so all of that plays into basically every tissue having the potential of being angry and sending a pain signal. But in this specific scenario, if we're thinking muscle and how are these multiple muscles on both sides angry, we think of things like prolonged poor posturing, okay? We can also think of shoulder dysfunction. If you are someone who, whether it's with sports or work, repeated shoulder activities, so repetitive motions, repetitive actions, things that are in front of you, like pushing objects or assembling widgets, or playing a sport where you're like hitting and everything is forward. These are things that you're teaching your shoulders to bias that movement which is forward, which is in front of you. Most things we do are in front of us, and we are teaching our shoulders to move in that direction. So it could be that your posture and the resting position of your shoulders have accommodated to that over time, where they do sit a little forward. And there may be a level of like dysfunction, meaning you've trained muscles to do that activity, but they're not doing it efficiently. Like the small muscles are doing the job of the big muscles. There's a little bit of stress and tension. You can still do the task, but it's just not as efficient as it could be. The other thing is there's kind of two dynamics here. One of them is a lack of movement, which aligns with what we talked about with poor posturing and like prolonged sedentary positions, like too much sitting, basically. So a lack of movement is one of the things that can lead to the shoulders and the neck being in this state. So we're not conditioning them to move. We're not giving our muscles the good type of stress that they need so that they can tolerate the daily activities we throw at them. So there's a scenario where someone hasn't conditioned their muscles properly. And then there's another scenario where someone's very fit and active, but they're overexerting and sort of pushing their body past what its limit is. And that's also aggravating to the neck and the shoulders. I've seen both. So I've seen people who don't exercise and they sit most of the day that have this tension type headache. And then I've seen people that work out a lot and are very fit, but their bodies aren't necessarily able to tolerate what the amount of load they're putting through their shoulders and their neck. So whether it's like deadlift, or they do CrossFit, or they're doing a home workout and they're using dumbbells, or they do a heavy shoulder day, they can easily get into the realm of a tension type headache the next day if they overwork their shoulders. So it's not just a scenario where someone is not moving or has a more sedentary lifestyle. It could also be that someone's fit and seemingly healthy, but their shoulders aren't able to accommodate to the amount of load and stress they're putting through them. And then potentially someone that has hypermobility. So we think of this dynamic between a stable joint and then a hypermobile joint, and a stable joint meaning that maybe it doesn't have as many degrees of movement, but it's less prone to injury. And then the more mobile a joint is, mobility is good, but it also will lack some of the stability, and so it relies more on like muscle tissue that surrounds the joint. And so that hypermobile scenario oftentimes means there's more of a demand on the muscles that surround the neck and shoulders. And so sometimes this tension type headache pops up when we have a very hypermobile neck and shoulders. And if you're listening to this, you probably have some sense of how mobile you are. And if you're hypermobile, like as a kid, if like double jointed and that sort of thing, if you've had that hypermobility, you probably have lacked some stability, and so there's a level of like added tension to your shoulders and to your neck because those muscles need to kick in to work a little bit harder. The other thing that's commonly stated when someone has tension type headaches is they just feel like their head is heavy, like they just can't hold it up. They're never really comfortable. They're always like shifting and trying to find the next position. Their body intuitively there is basically saying you need to move. The solution is basically their body's giving them the solution. The body wants to move, they're not moving, and so they've sort of lost the ability to just sit still because it's become so uncomfortable, and their head just feels like it's super heavy. Like I've had people repeatedly tell me like someone just needs to hold their head up, and they feel like it would help. All right, so now let's talk about what to do about it. So the solution, I don't think is going to be a surprise. I mean, I've said it a few times already. We need to move. Okay. Now, I talked about the more like fit individual who exercises regularly. The movement needs to be therapeutic. Okay, so we need to move, and the movement needs to be therapeutic, working towards the goal of stabilizing and having a shoulder and neck that move efficiently, so that we're utilizing the motion we have, and we're not asking our shoulders and our neck to sustain one position for too long, and our body's able to meet the demands of the day. Okay, that's how we get rid of tension type headaches. So that could look like we look at what joints in the neck or shoulders aren't able to move like they should, and we physically work on those segments. That would be like the manual therapy that we provide here at Novera. And then we're restoring function so that the muscles can then do their job and you actually have the degree of movement that you're looking for. It could also be having specific exercises so that you're restoring the stability of your shoulders. So if you have a forward shoulder, forward head position, it's very, very likely that, like I talked about before, there's these two muscles in the shoulder, the upper trap and the levator scapula, that run from the shoulder blade to your neck, and they will play a part in tension type headaches. One, because they're helping stabilize the neck, but they're also potentially helping move the neck if the neck is stiff. So it's kind of like a chicken and the egg scenario. But the upper trap is typically underdeveloped. It's not conditioned like it should be. So one of the keys to getting out of this is actually getting the upper trap conditioned. Sometimes the upper trap is weak and it has all these knots through it. That's why people feel like massaging it is helpful, and it's not necessarily unhelpful, but we need to condition it. We need to actually exercise it, move it. And so when we take someone through our coaching process or in person, we take them through different exercises that will help improve shoulder stability and specifically getting their upper trap functioning again so that the levator scapula doesn't have to do as much work. The levator scapula is the muscle that will just kind of pull your shoulders up to your ears. And there's a lot of tension there, and that can even send pain into the head. So it's a smaller muscle, and the upper trap's a bigger muscle. So we want the upper trap to do most of the work, and then the levator scapula calm down. And so the dynamic is upper trap's kind of weak. It's not doing its job. Levator scapula is having to do more, which is a problem. So we want to fix that. Very practical thing that you can do is just move more. Like use the movements that are available to you. So if everything you've done in the day is forward, like you can literally just like reach backward or rotate side to side, and do that every now and then. Look up if you've been looking down. Glide your head back. So just pinch your shoulder blades back. Like do these movements that are available to you. It doesn't need to be like prescriptive or a doctor needing to tell you. Just figure out how your shoulder can move and like move it into those positions every now and then. And that can be really helpful, reminding your body like, hey, we can still move like this even though I've been sitting at this desk. Get a standing desk. That's one of the number one things we recommend to the people we work with. Go on frequent walks. Walking's very therapeutic. It's not going to be something that overexerts your shoulders at all. Just walk, move your shoulders, move your arms, walk with a little bit faster pace, and you'll find that to be therapeutic. And when it comes to the person that has the tension headaches from overloading the shoulders, what I would say is you may need to dial back your exercise intensity and focus on very specific exercises to help improve like the stability and proper function of your shoulders. So that could be finding a PT in your area. That could be allowing us to help coach you through that. But we need to probably dial back the intensity of your exercise until your shoulders are able to tolerate it. Pain is your guide. So if you do an exercise and then the next day or later that evening you have a headache or you just feel like tight, that would be an indication you did too much. What's interesting about muscle is that when muscle is angry, typically it's kind of a delayed response. So that dull sensation of the headache means it's from the muscles, and the muscles are probably reacting to something that happened hours or like even a day prior. Okay? So start thinking about, wow, I woke up with kind of a tension type headache. What did I do yesterday? And then, of course, neck stability. So we want the neck to be stable. We don't want the neck relying on the shoulders to help keep it stable and help it move. We want them to be pretty much independent. And so the shoulders can relax, the neck can do its own thing, and that you don't feel like your head's super heavy and you just can't hold it up. And so giving your body the movement it needs, and then some specific exercises to help condition these areas, and then changing just the little postures you're in throughout the day, implementing movement, walking. That's kind of the formula that we would follow to help someone, of course, with the manual therapy, the hands-on as well. But that's a formula that we would follow to help someone get out of a tension type headache situation, and we do it all the time. There you go. There's tension type headaches, and probably, I was going to say in a nutshell, but that was probably more robust, and hopefully some of the most helpful info that you can find on the internet. I think when you search for headaches of any type, it's kind of bleak. I mean, all roads lead to medication. So at least we're providing an avenue outside of meds, something that you can control, feel like you're empowered, educated. If you listen to this podcast and you appreciate what we're doing, please share it, like it, subscribe on whatever platform you listen. Thank you all so much for listening to the Headache Doctor podcast, where it's our mission to educate and empower everyone with headaches and migraines so that you can break free from a life of fear of your next headache or migraine and dependence on medication. We'll see you next week.